Greetings and welcome. We turn now back in 303 to the unstoppable volume of Mr. Conrad's. We are in lesson 5-6. Puppy love is what he calls it. Let's begin in our journals for just a moment with this topic. The most powerful love is unconditional love. Of course, we've always known this, and in the history of the world we read great thinkers like Gandhi and others who made this argument. Of course, Jesus Christ comes to mind as well as a religious figure who has taught this truth. Let's turn now to this chapter 56 called Puppy Love. It's a somewhat strange title, as many of these chapters are. Let's see what we have to learn here. One of life's best lessons can be learned from a puppy dog. Their unconditional love is a quality more of us should emulate. No matter how bad a day you've had or how mad or upset you feel, your dog's always glad to see you. He greets you by jumping in the air, wagging his tail, and quite possibly licking you to death. Now, I'm not suggesting we go around jumping in the air and licking each other. But I gotta think this world would be a whole lot better place if we all had that unconditional puppy love for one another. I felt that puppy love for my grandfather, Henry de Turk. Hank, as he was called by those closest to him, lived in a tiny home. A house painter by trade, he never earned much over minimum wage. Never owned a brand new car. He and my grandmother, Helen, reared three kids in that tiny home, which for a long time had no inside toilet. The fact that Pop-Pop didn't have a lot of money never mattered to me. Besides, Pop-Pop took me fishing ever since I was old enough to walk. He'd always make time for that. Every time we fished together, no matter how good or bad the fishing was, he'd always talk about someday going to Canada. I hear you catch a fish with every cast, I heard him say 1,000,000 times. It always made me feel a little bad because I knew he'd never be able to afford such a trip. I'll never forget how he reacted when I told him I had gotten a teaching job in Colorado. Although he was happy for me, I could sense he was sad too. He was losing his fishing partner and I was losing mine. Before I left Pennsylvania, we agreed to go fishing together one last time. We were going to fish for muskies, the fish of 10,000 casts. On the day of our last fishing trip, we used big expensive lures to try and catch the elusive muskie. Every time Pop-Pop's lure got stuck on a rock, I would strip down to my shorts and go diving down into the water following his fishing line until I freed the lure. He never liked when I did it, but he sure liked getting his $9 lure back. After several hours of casting, we didn't even get a single bite. I told Pop-Pop I was going to try one more cast and then we would leave. He reluctantly agreed, all the while knowing it was going to be our last time fishing together. As I cast my line on that proverbial last cast, I never imagined what would happen next. Suddenly, my lure stopped, just as if I'd gotten snagged on a large rock. I set the hook out of frustration, thinking I would soon be swimming for my lure. That was when I noticed the line peeling out of my reel. This rock was swimming away from me. I yelled to Pop-Pop. He ran 1/4 mile back to my car to get the brand new telescoping fish net he had proudly purchased. It still had the price tag on it as he lowered it into the water. Together, we eventually landed a 50-inch muskie that weighed close to 30 pounds. But only after it snapped the telescoping handle right off the brand new net. Neither of us cared about that as we were dancing and jumping around, celebrating like two little kids. That fish ended up being the largest ever caught in Berks County at that time. I got that memory mounted, and we even had our picture in the Reading Times newspaper, the two of us forever captured in time, holding our final trophy fish. On the way home, Pop-Pop mentioned something about fishing in Canada again. I made a vow to myself to somehow see that Pop-Pop would get to live his dream, because he had just helped me live mine. Well, several years later, after buying and renovating some property in Colorado, I was able to save up a few extra dollars. At that time, Pop-Pop was working as a security officer at Albright College in Reading, Pennsylvania. When late one night, one of the dormitories caught fire, Pop-Pop single-handedly got all of the students safely out of the burning building. He was later rushed to the hospital to be treated for smoke inhalation. Well-wishers sent him flowers and fruit baskets to show their gratitude for all the lives he had saved. Hank de Turk was a hero. I knew what I had to do. I called him on the phone to congratulate him. Then I asked him if he remembered how he always talked about someday going to Canada. Why, of course, he replied. Well, Pop-Pop, I'd like to take you there. My treat for all of the times you took me fishing, I said. At first, there was just silence on the other end of the line. Pop-Pop, you still there? I asked. When he finally answered, I could tell he'd been crying. Pack your stuff, buddy. We're going to Canada, I told him. That summer, I took my dad and Pop-Pop way up north, close to the Arctic Circle, for the fishing trip of a lifetime. We even flew in a float boat that landed right on the lake. I never witnessed my grandfather having so much fun. He was like a little kid again, and we caught hundreds of fish. At one point, Pop-Pop turned to me and said, "It's just like they said it was, a fish every cast." I got that whole trip on video. It was a dream come true. Pop-Pop had such a good time that when he got home, he was making plans to sell that tiny house he lived in and move out to Colorado. He was going to live in the apartment right next to our house until we could build him a log home on the property. Since Nene had passed away years earlier, he could begin a new life. We would fish together whenever we wanted. He was on his way home after having his trip mapped out from the American Automobile Association when he experienced a gallbladder attack. The pain was so excruciating that he had to stop his car on the roadside. The operation he underwent resulted in a blood clot that unexpectedly went to his heart. Less than 3 months after our once-in-a-lifetime trip, my fishing buddy was gone forever. After the funeral, all of the family sat and watched the video of Pop-Pop and the fishing trip to Canada. We all laughed and cried as we watched him relive his dream. I'm so thankful I took that video camera. For that, I said, thank God. And then finally, the Unstoppable You loves their puppies because they don't live forever. Let's make some quick observations for your journal notes. Here's obviously a very powerful, personal kind of reflection from Mr. Conrad. But I think it reminds us of a couple of things. Let's write it down in our journals. One, I think this is self-evident, but let's say it nonetheless. Life is precious. Right? And of course, let's point this out. You learn that life is precious, and some of us in our own lives already can report this. You learn that life is precious the most when you lose what you most love. Right? When you lose what you most love. That's when you begin to realize, wow, life is short, life is precious. Of course, the second message is obvious, self-evident, but let's say it anyway. Let's treasure the ones that we love now. Let's say thank you to them before we graduate. Let's appreciate the people in our lives who have been so instrumental in making us who we are, in improving us in some way. And finally, this is an interesting observation. Let's learn to love like a puppy. Do something fine for someone you really care about. His ability. Notice it happened years later. It's a fine question. Write down in your journals really quickly, who's one person that you would love to do something fine for, just like he did for Pop-Pop, before you die. I mean, this is one of the great kind of maybe goals for our life, is to say, if there's one person in my life I'd love to do something for, what would that be? And how can you make it happen? This is a wonderful question. Well, there you go. Puppy Love, a somewhat strange title for that chapter. Thank you.